Hi, everyone. Welcome to the National Parents Union Nightly Restorative Check-in. I am Dr. Enjolie Laferrie, and today is Friday. Let's see, what is it? February 12th. I'm typically in Arizona and on autumn land in a beautiful Sonoran desert. But right now, my body's in Atlanta, Georgia. And so it's been nice to look up and learn who the original peoples are of this space. So what I learned, and somebody correct me. So I learned that the Eastern Cherokee, that these are their original lands, and also the lower Muskogee Creek tribe, which I'm not familiar with. So I want to acknowledge the space that I'm on. Let's see. So the nightly restorative check-in is the brainchild of Marisol Queveda Reducho. I always think of the check-in as being like, what do I want to be doing on Fridays? I want to eat yummy food. I want to chill with my people. I want somebody to be able to kind of check in on me or me them, and to really have time to be able to say that this is, describe what's going on and occurring in our lives. So that's how I think about the check-in, right? It's for caregivers, it's for parents, it's for all of you who give, to other people, educators as well. And hello, Maritza. Hello, Rodolfo. Oh, hey, feliz cumpleaños. Your birthday just passed. I actually should say this, you guys. In NPU, I'm learning. We have a lot of Aquarians. We have a lot of February birthdays. Carrie Rodriguez, the founder and the president of the organization, her birthday just passed. Maritza's birthday just passed. So hello, Jose Manuel. Hello. So anyway, hi everyone. Okay, so I was saying this show is the brainchild of Marisol Queveda, and I was one of the first guests on her show. NPU is now a year old, and so the show is about a year old. And she brought me on because I'm a hypnotherapist and a psychologist. And I introduced a breath pattern titled 478. And so both Marisol and I open up the show with that. So you can catch Marisol on Mondays and Wednesdays, and then obviously I'm here on Fridays. So we'll do that. So, and you guys forgive me. If you hear things, I have no control, which is fun and fine. You know what I mean? If you guys hear things in the background, like there's a dog eating, out of his bowl right now in the kitchen, I simply can't control this stuff. We operate at the pace of our children and our families and our four-legged children as well, right? So anyway, the breath pattern, like I said, is titled 478. You're inhaling for 4 seconds, holding your breath for 7 seconds, and then exhaling for 8 seconds. And we will do that 4 times around. I will count it out for you. If at any point you get lost, just kind of go back to your normal breath pattern and then pick back up on the 4 count. This breath pattern is really helpful if you are struggling with insomnia, you wake up in the middle of the night and you need to go back to sleep. That's how Marisol uses it. I use it as a transition, if I need to kind of get centered from one activity to the next. That's how I use it. So it's good to, you only want to use this breath pattern really about once a day. You're not going to harm yourself, but it's effective with just you using it once a day, and then maybe in the future working up to twice a day. Okay, let me pull my energy back in. All right, you guys, those of you who watch me know I get excited, so I got to relax. Okay, so I always encourage you to either close your eyes or to find a focal point, and so go ahead and do that. Take your natural breath as you would, inhaling in through your nose and out through your mouth. And on this next inhalation, inhale for 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Release. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Inhale. 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Release. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Inhale. 3, 2, 1. Hold. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Release. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Inhale. 3, 2, 1. Hold. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Release. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Go back to your regular breath. That was good. So actually, like I've said many times, the way that I feel after you all do the breath pattern, because I'm not doing it with you, the way that I feel after I do the breath pattern, I think is usually indicative of like somebody was able to take a deeper and fuller breath after that, which is a good indication of going into relaxation mode. And one of these days, we'll have a more conversation about relaxation mode in this breath pattern. Okay, so let me finish introducing myself a little bit more. I've already talked about myself professionally. So I am originally from Southern California. I come from Afro-Caribbean, Afro-Cuban roots on my father's side. So we are Taino and Arawak. My mother is Guatemalan, so we hail from Maya territory. Some of you have already met and seen my siblings because they were some of the first guests when I started hosting on Fridays. I'm also a mother to a 21-year-old child. I don't even know how that happens, who's in here telling me hello. So greeting my daughter in a good way. So other parts that are particularly important to who I am is that I'm a member of the Siwa Patli Collective. You've also seen some of my comadres and some of my elders here on this show. We are an organization that focuses on Indigenous mothering. So we like to say we support Indigenous families from womb to tomb. As a part of the work with the collective is how we actually got connected to mass liberation. And I will introduce our mass liberation and their executive director here in a second, but I just want to give one quick little announcement. Want to encourage you all to become members of the National Parents Union. It is free. You are welcome. Go to our website, which is nationalparentsunion.org. In a second here, I'll type it into the chat. Or if somebody wants to help me and type it into the chat, that would be amazing. Like Rodolfo or Beyonce, you're in here. But anyway, so go to the nationalparentsunion.org and sign up and become a member. You can get information about things like our town hall, which is scheduled for the 18th of February. So actually our special guest will be Tamika Mallory from Black Lives Matter, from the national organization. So we have amazing town halls. Last one we had Dolores Huerta. And you can just become more informed about the beautiful work that we're doing. Okay, so let's transition now, right? And allow me to start to introduce to you our topic for today. Mass Liberation is an organization that builds power, right? They build power to end mass incarceration and to divest from the carceral system in Arizona. They really focus on those that are directly impacted. And they're demanding action from city officials presently, right now, demanding action from city officials to end political persecutions, which we're going to talk about in response to some of the nonviolent protesters that engaged in exercise their civil rights this past summer. So as a representative of mass liberation, we actually have Lola Sango. She's been teaching me how to pronounce her last name, you all, and I think I messed it up, but I think I got it right the last name, Lola Sango. I'm going to bring her in really fast and greet her and then finish reading her bio. Hello, Lola.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. Thank you. You did well with my last name. Thank you for trying.
Yes, and forgive me, right? It's not hard, but it's certainly like not a name that have pronounced, or a set of vowels and letters that I've kind of put together. So I do my best. But let me read your bio just to give people this introduction, and they can look at you as I'm reading it, right? And then afterwards, I'm going to encourage you to add any other information that you think would be helpful for our audience to know so they can understand where you're coming from. So Lola is a formerly incarcerated organizer from South Phoenix. She's been working on issues related to mass incarceration since 2003. In 2011, she co-founded Humanities Behind the Walls, a local collective of organizers. Sorry, the dog is dogging right now. So I hope you guys hear barking. Anyway, the collective of organizers, artists, and educators who partnered with ASU School of Transformation to bring the study of humanities to prisoners and provide them access to grassroots organizations and campaigns. In 2018, Lola joined the Mass Liberation Arizona, a national decriminalization campaign that seeks to end mass incarceration. In 2019, Lola became a Reimagining Community Fellow with the National Council for Incarcerated and Formerly Incarcerated Women and Girls. And in 2020, she received a fellowship with the Movement for Black Lives Electoral Justice League. Lola approaches her work as an abolitionist, a thinker, a mother. I think we heard her child in the background there, an activist, a Black feminist, and a Muslim. Lola will continue to prioritize directly impacted Black-led projects that focus on transformative justice, revolution, and Black joy. So again, welcome, Lola. Thank you so much for giving of your time.
Thank you. Thank you.
Let's kind of extend, right, that introduction. And we like to take our time, or at least that's the way that I run this show. Who else are you, right? So I feel like this is your list. That's your street cred. That's your professional cred. But who else are you?
That's a really interesting question. These days, it's hard to remember when you're in the throes of really what is an historic moment around watching sort of how politicized the for Black liberation has always been, right? But it's actually become more pronounced. It's really hard, I think, to remember who we are also in the midst of a pandemic, right? So I've come to become, I don't think I am who I was this time last year. I'm now. I've learned to garden, to grow food in my backyard. I'm a meditator, which I wasn't at the beginning of this pandemic either. I'm a napper. I'm someone who's learning to take naps. So yeah, those are some of the new ways that I'm Lola. Yeah.
Yes, I'm super down for the naps. I'm excited that you're napping. And I should say, I have a background in meditation and biofeedback. And so I'm a big proponent of meditation and happy for you that you're doing that. And let's just, before you came on, I was kind of prepping you with some questions. I think it's so important for people who give so much to others or give to so much to aspects of society. Yes, Maritza, to engage in self-care, because if we're, running out of energy, then how can we give to the causes that we fight so hard for? So I'm going to encourage you to continue that nap ministry, Let's talk about how we met. Let's talk about, that's a common way that I start with all of my guests. And that this is a newer relationship, right? We're cultivating, we're at the start of a relationship. But what's your version? How did mass liberation or you and I kind of get to know one another?
Well, so, it's been interesting in the last year of mass liberation. At this time last year, we were 3 employees of a larger organization who eventually broke away to become our own individual organization. And now we're a group of 13 staff members. So we've grown really quickly. And in that time, we've really done a lot of work to try to make sure that we are in partnership with other organizations and efforts. And so the Siwapatli Collective is how we met, right, through your work there. And we've been working through land use and development issues. We've been working on displacement issues, and we actually became, I think, acquainted through that work. You and I actually, for the first time, only meet today. But right, our work intersected, and that has been a really beautiful story. And I've known of your work, and I've known of those connections for some time now. So that's how we met. What is your version of that? I'm curious. Do you mind if I ask you now?
Similar, no, yeah, please. So I would say that I too am an admirer of mass liberation's work, and I would say that Joe Larios, right, one of I don't know if his role is as an administrative role or what his role is with your organization, but that's who has been, I think, the bridge, right, for our 2 organizations. And just, I'm an admirer of your work, of your organization's work. I really feel that you take, I mean this energetically and spiritually, you take a lot of hits, for our Arizona community. And so that's what I'm really appreciating, how you guys really stand in the gap of like a lot of issues that are facing our community right now. So yes, so I came to know, well, I think I've been following mass liberation just again through social media, right? Just through some of my interests in the work that I do. But Joe is who initially contacted us to kind of stand in support, right? Stand in support of mass liberation regarding these political persecutions that we'll talk about here in a second. And so that's most directly how you and I met.
Yeah. And just Joe is our organizing director, so he has a lot to do with the way the organizing, the programs have been built out. And so yeah, I just wanted to share that. That's who he is with us.
Yes, we should use titles, right? We earn them, so we should use them.
So. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Okay, so let's also, before we jump into the work, I want to, again, it's a check-in, so I want to ask you, kind of a little bit more deeply, like, how is your life going right now? And I want to encourage you to be as honest and as frank as you'd like to be. I know that it's a hard time right now. So do you want to share about how things are going in your world outside of, including your work or outside of your work, however you want to take that?
Sure. I'm honest, it's just been around the clock. The state is this humongous apparatus that has all of these tools at its disposal. And what we find, like, especially with these political prosecutions, there are so many folks who are facing very serious charges. And I know myself being formerly incarcerated, some of this like re-traumatizes me. Some of the urgency comes back from my own lived experience. And so I think at times it can be overwhelming where you just have to sit down and just breathe. And I've definitely learned to connect with my breath because of the shortness. It goes away. It's just so scary when you, something that's happening. I'm getting messages now that they're, that the news is airing something that we hadn't known about with the protest videos. And I'm hearing the stories and hearing what those police have done. And it just takes your breath away. And so I think at times I just, I'm overwhelmed and very tired. We've been working since May of last year to really support people exercising their free speech. And it's been a really trying and difficult time. And like I said, the state has all of its tools at its disposal. It has an entire army of people that do the work of prosecuting people and the work of silencing its opponents. And so we as a collective on the ground, we don't have the same apparatus, and we find ourselves tired. We find ourselves sleepless. We find ourselves also, I think, a little bit overwhelmed by, we know this stuff in the theory level, but when you actually get embodied and you see people actually with their, there's folks on our staff who are directly impacted. We had to watch a video the other day that was aired on the news of them just tearing his body in 2 different directions. And just the violence, the overt violence, it's just been very hard to witness and watch. So it's weighing on us. It's taking its toll, if I'm honest.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And I think that, as far as NPU, we definitely come from an educational slant, but I would say that most of us are activists or organizers in our own right. Many individuals, right, organize or have founded various nonprofits. And so, yeah, we're all in our little pockets, right, with our issues, but that re-traumatization, that vicarious trauma, that re-triggering, right, is real for all of us. And I think in some ways, I don't even want to say yay or exciting. It's great that different issues are being highlighted and attention is being poured on them, that especially the issues that we're working towards, but it is hard and we don't discuss enough how triggering and re-traumatizing it can be. So I told you, I'm going to throw you a little curveball right now. I told you I would ask you this question at the end. I'm going to ask you this question up front. So how do you take care of yourself? Like, how do you manage other? And I'm not asking you like a quiz. I'm asking you because there's lots of people that are going to listen that are in your same shoes. And so whatever little wisdom you have, I think might remind them of some tools they have.
Yeah. I actually learned how to do that in prison. It's overwhelming. The whole thing is disorienting. You don't have the tools that most folks use to sort of detach, like watch a television show or drink a glass of wine, or you don't have any of that, right? So you have to really go inward and figure out, like, what does my body need? What does my mind need? What nourishes me? And then what also do I need to do to unplug? Because, you can can't get away from your thoughts in an environment where you have nothing to distract yourself, right? So I learned breath, like I just mentioned it just briefly, but just taking deep breaths, making sure that I'm breathing, stretching the body. The biggest, I hear you. The biggest act of resistance, I know, right? The biggest act of resistance, I believe, is surviving, right? So what do we do to make sure that we're doing that? Eating right, spending time cooking, that is so therapeutic to me. Like I said, I'm gardening, so going out and watching my mature vegetables grow and then pulling them out of the earth, washing them off, spending time teaching my son what they are, eating them in all of their different forms of where they're raw, where they're cooked, where they're, you know, leftovers, all of it, and talking about it. Food, music, rest, and I'm Muslim. I pray 5 times a day, alhamdulillah, and that makes a big difference in my life to be able to always 5 times be connected back to Allah, to God. And that really helps me, I think, more than anything, to like stay grounded.
Absolutely, and I think whatever our fruits or whatever we do to kind of engage in what I know as to be contemplative practices, right? That is restorative, right? And I'm really touched by some of the actually like the conversations of older activists, right? That are highlighting our youth right now, and that our youth, what they understand. I'm including you in this, Lola, right? I don't even know how old you are, but I'm going to call you young, even though we were talking about our before we came in. But that our younger people, right, that they're closer to, they have more balance, they have more of an awareness of their mental health, right? And so even though they're pushing for change, they're actually a little bit better at taking care of themselves, which is so important. Okay, so I think that's a good segue so that we can get into what we're here to talk about. And we have some people saying hello. I'm going to call you Tia Yoli, right? Just because that's what Marisol calls you. Enjolie, the other Enjolie. Thank you for, acknowledging Lola's words and connecting with her. So I don't know if people kind of understand, right, what the concept of political persecutions are. So can you take your time in setting the context for us of what does that mean, and go ahead and localize it, like what's going on in Arizona so people understand our conversation?
Sure. I think, for years, all across the country, there's been a coordinated effort between multiple law enforcement agencies to politically target and prosecute critics of the police. Like, that's a historic thing. These efforts have been particularly pronounced, recently in the wake of the killing of George Floyd and Deion Johnson. And here in Arizona, hundreds of folks took to the streets. Those murders were the same day. George Floyd was actually later in the day than Deion Johnson, who was killed by Department of Public Safety. And when hundreds of folks took to the streets, of those people who showed up in the streets, there were some well-known activists. We've found now over the course of just watching how that played out over the summer, that folks have been targeted, and that really, as we're watching through the legal process, we're finding that there was a sprawling multi-agency apparatus that actually was working to falsely charge these folks with very serious felonies. And it's an effort to really weaponize the criminal legal system so that they can jail and intimidate and silence activists, people who are out really exercising their First Amendment rights. And so what makes it political, and this is the really important part, is that when governments actually use criminal legal systems to illegitimately destroy their political opponents. So that's when they're targeting people who are outwardly voicing their frustrations against the system. And so, here in Arizona, we, in February of 2020, we had actually petitioned to get a civilian review board implemented on the city level, and that was a win. And so when we saw in May that the police had killed Deion Johnson, folks took to the streets, and the very first thing they said was to defund the police, right? So there's already a sort of a political slogan that's out there on the streets. And those people that we were protesting, and I say we loosely, I didn't actually go protest because I have a son and I was home, but I'm watching on the streets, those folks are being responded to by the very agency that they're protesting. And then the Maricopa Attorney's Office, we see them conspiring with police to falsely arrest and prosecute those folks too, because later in down the line, after some of these protests had been going on for some time, and it was around, again, the murder of Deion Johnson, you see Alistair Adele, who is our county attorney, appointed at the time, she hadn't been elected yet, choose not to prosecute the officer who murdered Deon Johnson. And so, you know, folks were, it's like 3, 4, 10, hundreds of layers, right, of grief that are bringing people to the street. So if we go back to the beginning of the protests over the summer, there were thousands of people that took the streets when you think of the vast number of people who showed up all summer long. And there's an estimated, I think, 414 arrests that took place. And 350 plus of those were between May 28th and I think the end of June. And then you see it slows down, and then only 60 people between July 1st and the end of November. And what happens during that time is you start to see them start to change their charging patterns. You see them charging people with, in the beginning, with misdemeanors, and some of them were felonies, but they get to be very serious starting around the beginning of July and into November. Now, they start to graduate from unlawful assembly to rioting and aggravated assault against police officers. And now we're seeing that some of those folks, toward the latter part of those arrests, were charged with criminal street gang activity. And so for folks who don't know, the penalty for criminal street gang activity is to tack on an additional 3 to 5 years, depending on how it's been charged. And it's wild because these people who've never met each other. Like, these are people who are in the streets, who took to the streets because of their being sick and tired of police killing Black people, and now are being lumped together as though they had known each other all along and are a criminal street gang. So that is actually, yeah, that's sort of a synopsis. I mean, it can go on and on. There's a whole lot of moving parts, but that's the gist.
Yeah, I think about, you know, it's weaponizing, right? So it's a weaponizing of the structures, of the power structure. And I think what people, so I should share y'all that I used to teach courses like psychology of culture, right? Diversity related courses, psychology of gender, right? And as you try to help kind of students, young people understand, you know, why does somebody protest? What is the reason of, like, you know, somebody who is protesting is pushing against the system. And so you should understand that the system's going to push back, and the system has more tools and resources, right, than individuals have. So protesters protest because it's the only power, the only social capital that they have, right? But then what's interesting is then you get to see what ammunition, right? What ammunition or what the structure does. The structure is going to do what it does. It's going to push back with laws. It's going to push back with all the things that you're fighting against. And because they maybe have more power, more visibility, whatever it is, sometimes to some people, their rationale, the structure's rationale, seems more viable, like it makes sense more because it's what we're used to, right? And organizations like yours, right, and the work you're doing is pushing back and saying, no, why is that the case, right? And we're just watching them push back with what they do, which is this weaponizing of really definitions, you know, like, but definitions that matter and what it is to have the power to be able to define that then really changes and shifts someone's life. Can you say more about, with regards to these political persecutions, what you are hoping for, what you are asking for from city officials?
Well, so, you know, we were talking just now on the city level about police and their involvement. There is also, again, it's multi-pronged, multi-agency. It is also the Maricopa County Attorney's Office. And in fact, more so at this point, I think the demand goes to them. They, you know, the people who were in the streets who were saying defund police were also in the streets talking about dropping Alistair Adele. This was a contested election that was actually one of the most close county attorney races that has ever happened in my lifetime. And I've lived in Arizona long enough. I won't date myself how long. But this was a very close election. And so when Alistair Adele chose not to prosecute the officer who killed Deon Johnson, it was in the heart of her campaign to win the seat. She had already been appointed to the seat, but she was looking to be elected to the seat. And so during that time, I mean, she was a lackluster candidate. Not a lot of folks knew who she was. She didn't have a legacy to fall back on. So it looks like she just goes back to the legacy of brutality of her predecessors, right? So the people, Bill Montgomery, and prior to him, Andrew Thomas, who have a history of just being some of the most brutal prosecutors in the nation. And Andrew Thomas was disbarred and removed. And so, like, her relying on that history tells us, or her relying on those tactics tells us a lot about who she is. And so people took the streets and they said, you know, drop Adele. And how we got involved was we also were actually opponents to her campaign as well. So during the time people were in the streets, a lot of them contacted us and said, look, we want to get our voices heard too. So they knocked on doors and distributed literature. And so when you think about, and again, who is the opponent of the state, you've got people who are knocking on doors saying, get involved civically. Like, it's not just this protest situation, that you can also go and you can attack this issue at the ballot box. And so then you see, right, people who had some of these people had their charges dropped on the lower level. Some of these people had been arrested, seen a judge, had the charges dropped because probable cause wasn't there. And then you see the county attorney come back and have secret hearings with the grand jury and indict these folks. And if there's a series out right now from ABC 15, which is a local news outlet, who has put out a multi part series that is actually talking about some of the evidence that they withheld, the prosecutors withheld at the grand jury. In fact, you'll see more evidence than the grand jurors ever did if you watch the series. And it's very disturbing to think, right, that the county attorney's office didn't care to be the stewards of justice that they're supposed to be. Instead, they were trying to operate from a political agenda. So you'll see how we've got Brady listed officers testifying as experts. And I'll say, right, that we're talking on the city level that we want the police to be held accountable for their actions. But really, at the end of the day, not only do we need the county attorney's office to drop these ridiculous and false, completely fabricated charges, we also need them to hold accountable the prosecutors who are actually the ones who are carrying these cases. It's a specific bureau within the prosecutor's office called the First Responders Bureau, and it was created by Alistair Adele several months after she took office as an appointee in 2019. And then it's just carried through now. And I wouldn't be surprised if they've done no other work than to prosecute these protesters. I honestly don't know, but I mean, it's just very strange that all of a sudden this First Responders Bureau has an entire focus on creating false gang charges and prosecuting protesters who are outside just exercising their First Amendment rights. And so the demand is for them to drop the charges, but also to hold accountable the prosecutors who came up with this outlandish idea that these strangers are part of a street gang and are charging people, wasting tax dollars and ruining and destroying lives of young people. Some of these people are minors.
Absolutely. I think of my daughter and I, right? We were out during some of the protests. I think of my nephews, right? Who are at the beginnings, right? If we want to engage, right, youth, and in kind of like the pillars of our democracy, right, which is one of like free speech, right? But then here we go, they go out and there's something that they're trying to fight for, and then we come back and throw charges at them that are especially, particularly severe and have long-lasting consequences. Like, what are we trying to teach them, right? Because we know we want active citizens, right? And we know that this is a form of activating our being civically engaged, right? But if we're going to make it all have negative repercussions, right, just because it's against the system, there isn't going to be shifts or changes in the system. So yeah, I very much think of like the people who I was walking with, and again, my nephews more than anything, who are young African-American boys, right? Of what could happen to them, right? Just for them wanting to be just for their passion, just for their engagement. What I understand that you all are asking different officials to denounce the charges, in addition to, right, having as you said, having Alistair and all those affiliated kind of drop the charges. What does it explain for people? Like, what does that do? What is that tactic? How has that worked in other places to ask other officials to denounce charges? How is that beneficial?
I mean, it's important just as an act of political solidarity to people who are really ultimately their constituents. I mean, these are the voting populace that came out. We had nurses, doctors, some of these folks who've been arrested have lost their graduate status in their educational programs because they've been arrested with street gang charges. These are people who are directly impacted, formerly incarcerated people. They're people from all over, all the different intersections are out there on the street. and representing your constituents who are already the ones who are out there saying these things when those are the people who were out there protesting to begin with. When they come to you as an elected official and ask you to use your power that we elected you to use for policymaking, to also represent our voices, because it's dangerous, right, for folks to even take the street, because what are they doing? You know, they're falsifying charges on folks. So we have to use the systems that are available to us as well by telling our elected officials who, you know, again, are folks that are supposed to be representing us, to be in political alignment and political solidarity with the people who were in the streets and the people who are outraged by this as well. We saw it happen in Utah. I don't know the story directly, like firsthand from any organizers, but I've been watching it in the media. And what happens is they also have a prosecutor who was very heavy-handed and came down and threw down gang charges that could have amounted to life in prison for some of these people. And what ended up happening was the city council and mayor, I'm not sure if it's the mayor, but I know that there were officials who spoke out. And that outrage that the community also displayed caused the prosecutor to conflict themselves out of the case, or to recuse themselves. I'm not sure the technical terminology there, but step, and they brought in a special prosecutor who reduced the charges. And, you know, the charges still, it's ludicrous to charge people for exercising their First Amendment rights. However, it's definitely a completely different story when you're trying to put somebody away for life, you know, with life in prison, than it is to charge them with misdemeanors, which is what many of those protesters are now facing because a different prosecutor came in.
And you know, it shows. Well, go ahead.
I was just going to say too, I don't think it's harmful for officials to name that it is important for Alistair Adele to recuse herself in this situation. She was being protested. The same thing with Phoenix Police Department. Phoenix Police Department was being protested. So how can they actually be witnesses against these folks as an objective entity? All of them need to recuse themselves. None of them should be being considered as evidence against folks when they are the people who are the target of the protest itself. And I think officials being able to say that. We are asking lawmakers as well. We've asked the Democratic caucus at the legislature to sit down and listen to us. And to voice their concerns as well. We know they're outraged, right? We see them tweeting. We see folks all over the country tweeting about Arizona right now. How are we going to organize that to build power and make sure that these officials listen to whoever I don't know who holds them accountable. If their constituents don't, then their peers need to. Sorry, I just had to finish that thought.
No, please. And forgive me, I think that there might be some cutting in and out, you know, on both of our ends. So I thought you were finished. I never want to interrupt. You know, as you share, it makes me just aware of the arbitrariness, you know, of laws, and that's the fluidity, you know, of definitions. And again, who gets to define, right, is the person who holds the power, and then how, you know, I'm speaking, you know, thinking of our audience, right? Who holds the power, and then who gets to make those define that power. It really gets to enact so much, you know, so much on the rest of us. And then how do we push back? I'm asking and encouraging, you know, people to think about how they're organizing, how they're trying to enact change, and really, you know, flat out asking you to consider, right, to support organizations like Mass Liberation, for you to ask the uncomfortable questions, right? Because if it doesn't make sense, if it looks weird, if it's what you're hearing on the news, and it does the approach or the issue doesn't make sense to you, it's because it's being delivered through somebody who has the means to kind of make themselves look good, make their organization, make their structure, right, look good. And again, you know, I'm thinking about the students and the people that I converse with and teach, and the ways that their minds kind of struggle to wrap themselves around these issues. I also, you know, we talked about this when we were preparing. I can't help but think about the differences that we're seeing in different states, right? So if anything, you know, during this pandemic, and that's also another thing we should say, during this pandemic, you all were marching in the middle of, right, of COVID-19, right? And so that also shows the importance, right, that there's a national pandemic, but that there's a pandemic related to police brutality, there's a pandemic related to the daily occurrences in your lives, and you have to kind of be in the scenario or in the situation where, like, what wins, right? What's going to be more detrimental to my life today? I'm going to choose to mask up, right? And then to go fight for this again. I feel like I want to like recreate this picture for you all. But I'm thinking about what also happened in Washington, D.C., right? And in the insurrections. And as soon as I heard about what was going on here in Arizona, I thought about that, like, wow, look at the difference, right? And I'm not the only one saying this. Nationally, several people, many people, millions of people are noticing the difference of, depending on skin color, depending on the issue you're fighting for, how maybe felony charges are not necessarily being brought against as many people as the insurrectionists, compared to maybe what we're seeing here in Arizona. Can you draw any parallels or things that you've noticed that what is being done in one scenario and not being done in the other?
Sure. Yeah, not many people. I mean, I'm not sure. Some people do, but not many people know. I think about the county recorder's office had some protesters who were the Stop the Steal Sharpie Gate group, who during the election counting of the votes, because we remember it drew out for days. Showed up at the county recorder's office, and it was interesting because Maricopa County Sheriff's Office were the agency that responded then. And when they did, they had created like free speech zones for folks. They gave out water bottles. Now, these are people who at the county recorder's office were outside. People would drive by and they were screaming racial slurs at people. They were saying homophobic and transphobic epithets. It was just really a wild time down there. And you have police sort of standing down, standing off to the side, and again, giving out water bottles and creating free speech zones for them. And at one point, those protesters entered the building with force after hours, and had like the county recorders were calling police and saying like, they're in here. And they were trespassing at the least. That's the least you could call it, right? And they were removed without incident, and that all took place in the same context during the same time frame, right? Because you remember these are happening over the summer here. Our uprising, the election is November 3rd, so it's very strange that it's not very strange. It's actually completely predictable. But it's really unfortunate to have seen that that's what happened. There was also folks who went to the Arizona Capitol around the same time, doing the same sort of thing, and there was property damage there. Nothing, no, and it's wild because if you're able to view some of the videos, and I know that that's not all information that's been made public, but you're able to view some of the videos from the protesters who are facing, again, very serious charges. And I think at this point we're looking at 37 people with multiple felonies. If you look at some of the videos, the body-worn camera footage, it's wild to see that they're saying that these people are rioting, and literally there's a woman who is praying for officers, and she gets snatched up and arrested. She's praying for them, and she has got an aggravated assault against a police officer charge. Mm-hmm. So it's definitely different. And then when you see what happened at the Capitol, and you see the Capitol Police taking selfies with people, it's just very clear, right, that it is when you are protesting for Black liberation that you're treated this way. And when you're exercising your freedom of speech to protect Black people, that's when you're treated this way. It isn't across the board. So it's not an equal protection under the law.
It makes me think of like who gets seen as people, as opposed to who gets seen as a nuisance. That's like the nicest way I could say it, a nuisance, or like whose life who isn't seen as a person or as a life that's valuable, and that's like really, I think, to me, like at the core of the comparison. And I'll be like transparent. That's why I want to compare it, because it's stark, and people are fighting so hard, people like you, right? And different folks are fighting so hard. That anything we can do to kind of help folks that don't understand, that feel confused, like we can make this any clearer, like that is the problem. It is the same activity being treated so differently. And part of it goes back to definitions, the valuing or the devaluing, right, of who is a person, who's a valuable person or not. And so then that says what you can do with their bodies and how you can treat their bodies. And that's basically what like the argument is about police brutality anyway, right? Of like, somebody using their power against bodies in different ways, right? Bodies meaning Black bodies, right? And all the other bodies that you talked about, trans bodies, so, bodies from the LGBT community, right? Immigrant bodies. We treat bodies differently depending on like the package that they're in. Where can folks view some of these videos if they want to, right? That you're talking about, so that they can make some decisions for themselves. Are they public, or is the information that your organization is privy to?
Well, so a lot of it is body-worn camera footage that had to be obtained by public information request or has been part of the discovery process for attorneys. It was just through our local media outlet, the ABC 15, that they were able to obtain them that way, and it compiled them into some footage that was made available to the public just through their 6-part series. It's called Politically Charged. And in fact, it's really interesting that a primetime, otherwise, no offense to ABC 15, but they're a lukewarm sort of politically, right, had no problem saying off the top, this is political. These are political prosecutions. These are lies. You've seen more than the grand jury has. So you could actually see them. I know that we're going to publish them on our website, and we're hosting every Monday for the next 2 weeks, Politically Charged Mondays, where we're going to review that footage. And we're actually sitting in a community education space with our base, and people who want to join, and anybody on this call is welcome to join, to be able to learn more about really what is actually happening, the political analysis, and what we know on the macro that actually feeds into that one moment that you see on video. So, and then I think that, ultimately it's just gonna, there are some folks who I think are going to take the story up on a national level eventually, because this is a historic moment. It really is. They are trying to take modern day political prisoners, and we are one of the worst in the nation. So I believe that there's going to be enough attention that eventually some of this stuff is going to get out to the public, but we will be publishing them on our website for sure, at least those media series, the series.
And I'm going to actually here, I'm pulling up your website so that I can kind of throw it in all the comments, so that you can get in touch with Mass Liberation. Also, I want to say that you all are very active on social media, right? So those are other ways to connect to the organization. And I'm going to directly put in this plug for you all and encourage you all to donate, right? If you support the work, right? I work for various nonprofits, right? The Ciudad Collective is a nonprofit. I'm also now connected to Rooted Northwest Arkansas. This is how we all do this work, right? We people support us. And so if you are concerned about these issues, right, I want to encourage you all to give if you can. I want to take a turn. We have about 10 minutes left. It goes like really quickly. And thank you to those that are adding to the ways that people can connect to Mass Lib. How do we have these conversations with our kids, So, and I guess I'm more so thinking, I feel like kids get it. I feel like kids understand. They have, for a lot of reasons that I could explain psychologically, but they understand fairness, right? They understand that one thing happens here and it doesn't happen here, or vice versa. But from maybe legally, the definitions, those things are challenging. So for parents who are maybe becoming aware of some of these issues, or their kids are becoming of age to have these conversations, what do you recommend about how they should have those conversations with either their kids or those around their kids' life?
It depends on the age of your child, for sure. I have a 21-year-old and I have a 3-year-old, so we're in like completely different places. When with my 21-year-old, I had to just give her permission to dream. I just had to be able to just say, I am not coming into this conversation with preconceived ideas. And I really want to hear what your thoughts are on this. Now, it's not just about, I had to build a foundation with her to talk to her about not only like police, because we're abolitionists, and abolition is, it's such this idea that almost becomes just like, so it's like it lives in the theory world and it doesn't feel practical. It doesn't feel like we can actually like do it in our day-to-day life. And so I start with abolition really because I think it's really important. And one of the ways that I talk about abolition with children and adults is to say, if you have a reference point for transatlantic slavery, if you have a reference point for what it was like to to have people as actual physical property and it be legal, right? That's the key, right? It's legal. When you're able to talk about that with your child, or if your child's of that age, it's to be thinking about, like, we glorify this notion of abolition, and that there was some idea that that was so heinous and wrong, but it was, remember, legal. It was legal the whole time. And just, reminding our children that just because it's legal doesn't make it okay is already, it already opens up the opportunity to dream. It causes us to start questioning the infrastructures around us, and that's helpful. But I also said, when you think about enslaved people back in those times, and you think of them meeting in churches, and you think of them meeting in the field or secretly, they weren't talking about how do you make slavery better by reforming it, right? That's the conversation that we continue to have around police reform and around prison reform, is that you can tinker with the system and that it'll get better. But could you imagine enslaved people saying, well, if we just tinker with this a little bit, it'll be better for us, right? No, I mean, I'm sure that there were that. Like, if we're being honest, I'm sure that there were people who were like, incrementally, right? We can move the needle a little bit, it'll get better. And so that's how abolitionists continue to do reform work. As long as we're shrinking the power of the system, as long as that system is being able to, is being dismantled, abolitionists will work in reform work. And so then you start teaching your children like ideas of like, oh, if we're going to make changes, let's don't make changes that are circular. Let's not make changes that make excuses for the system, like, oh, there's just bad masters or there's bad police. No, the whole system is a problem. The whole system is a problem. And when you think of abolition and you think of enslaved people, were they thinking back then, I must build the system in order for us to walk into it? We'll just stay enslaved for the next 100 years until we can figure out a system. No. People were imagining and building and creating new ways to protect and survive as abolition became a thing, right? I'm not going to romanticize abolition as though we've actually ridded ourselves of slavery. I don't believe that. And we have not rid ourselves of prisons either. But just with that idea in mind, particularly with what our children are being taught in public school as well, it's important to start building on these ideas of like, you don't have to wait until the system has been built for you. In fact, you can start to dream now. So what are some ways that we can respond to harm, which is not the same as crime? Because crime is something that the state decides. And legal, remember, just because it's legal or illegal doesn't make it right or wrong. So what are some ways we can respond to harm that actually addresses the actual harm, and not, right, like putting people over property, or property over people, or putting people in cages as though that's going to solve something and addresses harm at all. What do we do to address the actual harm? And I promise you, if your kid is of the age to have this conversation at all, they're going to teach you. Because my daughter's got this. She's like, let me start right here. And we'll go down the list. And she's got brilliant ideas. And I think about it and I'm like, oh, I'm in this skin for all of these years. And I'm not going to tell you how many, but all of these years, right, that I can't actually dream like she can. I can't actually I'm stuck in this box of this idea of what I've been brought. And so for me, it's really to do this activism, but to also to create this analysis for her and open up space for those young people to be dreaming out loud and building what they tell us. I have a 3-year-old now, and every time I turn on any kind of video for him, it's police on it. And I'm like, but I'm really working on, like, how am I going to raise a child who doesn't believe that that's right? Like, starting now. That's the real work of revolutionary parenting, I think. So yeah, I'm thankful for that question. Thank you for that.
You're welcome. Yeah, no, I think about, I'm trying to think about it maybe to make myself feel comfortable, but also thinking about it through a child's eyes of that, like, the basis is of like, how do we let people be free to do what they want to do? Again, going back to harm, as long as what they're doing isn't harming others. And if somebody has a problem with somebody else's freedom, then that is like, that's a good indicator that we should stop and look at that. You should stop and think about that, right? And it's a potentially a really good indicator of that there is a system supporting your point of view, if you can't recognize someone else's freedom, that like shouldn't even be debatable, but it is. And I'm not trying to like be Pollyanna or sugarcoat this or like even over philosophize it, but still that at the basis of like from that fairness principle of like, why can't somebody just live their life, right? And I think about somebody enslaved, I imagine that's what they would have wanted of like, can I just be without harm? Can I just be to realize my dreams, right? Can I just be instead of having to be used, and looked at as somebody who's non-human or subhuman. And that's most of us, right? We want to teach our kids to be good people and to recognize others and to treat people well. That would be a really great place to start, of like allowing people to be free to do what it is that they would like, as long as they're not harming someone else. And I think the hard part is, like, we know from like moral theory, so I'm going to turn into a psychologist for a second. We know that from moral theory, there are sticky points. There are sticky points. Like, we give all our kids all these examples of what do you do in this situation if, you're starving, but you don't have money. Like, we can create that example. This is not one of those examples. There's no like moral question to freedom. There's no moral question to treating people humanely, but we've turned it into a moral question, or a moral dilemma, I guess is a better way of saying it. Let's see. I'm looking at time. And so, I'm going to ask you a question. What are your dreams? I want to pose the same question that you posed to your daughter to take us out. So here, I'm going to do it two-pronged. I'm going to be fancy. What's your dream? And what's one thing that you're going to do this weekend to take care of yourself so you can activate that dream come Monday or whenever you work again?
So my dream is that everybody has food, water, sunshine, and love. It's broad, but it's my dream. And what am I going to do this weekend? I am going to lay on my hammock. I'm going to read Adrienne Maree Brown, and I'm going to snuggle with my little goose, who is my little guy. And we're going to sit outside and get some sun. Yeah, he agrees.
You affirmed it. Oh, that's so sweet. And actually, I have Emergent Strategies. I'm here in my suitcase, and it's a book that I'm going to be reading with someone else. So Adrienne Maree Brown is a lovely author for you all to follow, and she's actually very active on social media as well. So, well, I hope that you get to do all of those things, and I do. Like, from my heart, thank you. And I hear you. I hear how tired you are. I hear how worn you are. And you probably don't get it enough, but I just want to value all of the work that you do, all of the work that your organization does. And I wish you deep rest, deep rest, and this infinite support. And that, like, your road is easier, that people hear you, and hear so many other people who are fighting for so many other causes. So thank you so much for coming on tonight.
Thank you. And I return those wishes to you as well. We all need them.
Thank you. So for the rest of you, I want you to have a good weekend. I want you to chill. I want you to rest. I want you, think about, like, some of us are going to get Monday off for President's Day. I want you to think about, what you can do, right, to kind of shift your world. Maybe part of that is going to be, looking at mass liberation. That would be a really good thing to do. I'm actually fighting here, trying to find a good way for you all to find them, right? Maybe it's going to be, connecting to mass liberation, whatever it is, right? Take that day off and take that extra time. I'm going to suggest that you consider how you can help others. All right, everyone, have a great weekend. We'll see you next week on Friday. Bye-bye.